So to start off, what I thought I'd do is just talk a little bit about me and the ECD. So yeah, there's a lovely picture you've got there on the right, but in reality, a lot of this talk I'm going to be focusing on actually the picture that's more to the left. That's actually how I represent myself when I was delivering a lot of these ECD workshops. So as Kaylee did introduce, I am going to be focusing a lot on what I have learned from working in a primary processing industry, farming, machine operators, so a very male-dominated environment. But I'll share some key insights and lessons I definitely have taken from those experiences. But just a little bit about me. So I became a elephant rider in 2020. And I applied to become a pro elephant rider, so a certified consultant, very soon after that. This was actually very much driven by a professional and personal need. So it was kind of like the worlds aligned in both a professional and personal sense. So there was a real need. This was when I was working at Good Start Early Learning, which is a childcare provider in Australia. There was a real need with where the organisation was going to focus on emotional culture and tie it into strategy. So that's how it kind of aligned on a professional sense. But on a personal sense, I had gone through the hardest period of my my life and trying to understand the emotions that I was experiencing at that time, it really actually did help me. And so I got very much into emotional granularity and really understanding these emotions I'd never experienced before. Grief, hopelessness, not wanting to die, but actually not wanting to live. So there was a lot of different emotions that were coming up for me personally. So it was kind of actually a perfect time for me to go into this line of work. And during that time, as I was doing the certified consultant pathway, there were a lot of tools and resources that I did go into. And I'll touch on them briefly, but if you have or haven't explored them, the Brené Brown's Atlas of a Heart was like a Bible for me. And you can see actually the amount of post-its I've got in there. And also books like the Big Book of Emotions as well. It just helped me because I was so interested in actually the emotional granularity side. It really helped me dive into those singular emotions and really understand them. So that is a little bit about me. If you were to ask, well, the other day my my little one Henry did ask my husband, you know, what does mummy do for work? And I think he summed it up really well. He said she teaches people to be kind to each other. So I feel like I've never had my role described so perfectly. So if you ask my son what I do, I just teach people to be kind to each other. So that's a little bit about me, but let's jump in and really so you can understand where I was at when I walked into Ingham's. So I had left the early education and childcare sector and jumped into primary processing, farming and manufacturing. So my time in Good Start Early Learning, very female dominated workforce. It was very much urban and suburban locations. There was in society an increasing recognition of the importance of the role of early educators, I think with the commission and so forth. We did work with shifts, with shift patterns, but it was really a 12-hour shift. There was approximately 20% migrant workers in their workforce. All ECD work courses, workshops that we delivered were delivered virtually. So Good Start Early Learning is a national childcare provider. We've got over 650 centres across the country. So everything was delivered virtually. And it was delivered a very top-down approach. So the benefit being that there was a big move strategically for the organisation to shift in an operating model, and ECD was actually interwoven into that big shift. So it was delivered in a top-down approach. Now, if we flick across to primary processing and farming, extremely male-dominated workforce. It was just complete opposites if you looked at the ratio split. Very rural or regional locations. The role is essential, but really undervalued by the public. I mean, everyone, I think, benefited. Really sit down at the kitchen table, you eat a piece of chicken, or you go to McDonald's, you eat a nugget. Everyone's benefiting from that work, but it's very undervalued. 24-hour operations, so we had large different shifts at all times. Approximately 40% migrant workers, so a much larger migrant workforce. All ECD was delivered face-to-face, so I'd left pretty much a role that was all delivered, learning was done virtually, into one that was all done face-to-face. So that was a very big shift and jump. And this one took a bottom-up approach, so really actually working with the machine operators, the farmers, really building a case study to actually show the business what we could achieve if we focused on emotional culture. So that's a little bit of a overview of the comparison. And I will really focus on Ingham's and talk about some key lessons learned during my time there. But just to give you a little bit of imagery here that we talked to, this is just some of the workshops that we did. And I will actually go back to the images because they'll tell a bit of a story shortly. But first off, my first lesson working in this industry and doing the ECD in this industry is that men are just as emotional as women. And I think that I know that they are just emotional, but they do not have the same permission to possibly express how they feel. I was really shocked by how I got to witness huge moments of vulnerability, far larger than what I experienced at Good Start. And I witnessed fellow male colleagues really rally around a person who was showing emotion, so it was not shunned at all. And I really got a genuine insight into men's mental health and the uphill battle that they do face. The whole stiff upper lip concept is outdated. It's gone. It doesn't actually exist anymore. And bear in mind, this is the most male-dominated, masculine industry that well, I've definitely been exposed to. Those scenarios that I pitched at the very start of this talk are all real experiences. This all happens during an ECD workshop. So yes, I've worked with men who have beat their wives and have gone to jail, men who feel absolutely worthless, men who feel shame and embarrassment on such a regular basis with their own family, and men who have tried to commit suicide. So how did I deal with these moments? That brings my next lesson. So lesson 2, bring curiosity and empathy always. So in that moment, how did I feel towards that guy that beat his girlfriend? Don't get me wrong, there was that very initial, and if I'm being really honest, that very initial feeling of disgust. I don't agree. I don't think anyone should ever lay a hand on someone else. But I very quickly righted myself, because who was I to judge when I knew nothing about the situation? And when I started talking to this man, you could see that he deeply regretted his actions. And, you know, using further questions of, you know, how do you feel now? What emotions come up for you? Gave me insight into his thinking now and also his feelings now. Now, does domestic violence have a place in the ECD workshop? No, it really doesn't. But, and it was similar to what Claire shared at the start of this workshop, I was so aware that my goal was to bring emotional fluency into this workplace. How could I shut down a conversation like that if that was my goal? So there were so many moments in these workshops where I really had to pivot and think on my feet to further increase that vulnerability, that sharing, in order to reach the goal. So I think bringing curiosity and empathy to the ECD workshop is a really delicate practice. because I think if it's done poorly, you can go down this rabbit warren of discussion. You're going off on tangents. You're severely off course. But if done well, it really does increase that psychological safety of the group. And there are these greater moments of vulnerability and sharing an insight. So I think it definitely needs, the curiosity and empathy needs to be done, but it's definitely a practice. Now, there are actually 3 beliefs I always have in mind to help me bring around curiosity and empathy in any interaction and moment. And the 3 beliefs I have is, I have no idea what anyone else is going through at any time. No idea. The second one is, everyone, I walk through life and I believe that everyone is going through their own personal individual shit show right there and then. And I just don't know what their shit show is, but it's really bad. That's what I believe. And my third is obviously to be kind always. So I carry those around, and I feel like those beliefs do help trigger those emotions of curiosity and empathy. So that is lesson 2. Lesson 3, be like Lumiere. So over the time, I experimented with different ways I could accelerate psychological safety in these workshops, accelerate the vulnerability and just the general sharing across the group. Ultimately, what it got to was I was treating the participants like guests in my house. That's actually how it felt. But actually, it's probably a poor analogy, because if you ever came to my house, I'm a shit host. But my professional hosting skills really kind of excelled. They're top drawer now. So here are a few of the essentials that I had in place to be like Lumiere. So first off, rearrange the layout of particularly your tables and chairs in the room. I think I'll have to admit now, I think I was like, I used to be a lazy trainer where I'd walk in and be like, well, there's the tables and chairs, they'll shall remain there. I really experimented. So in a lot of the Ingham's workshops, they weren't the rooms that I was able to use. They weren't set up to be a very interactive experience. They were very much set up either in a U shape, which you can see in the top left-hand corner there, or just as a one big block of tables where people would sit around. But you can see in that first picture in the top left corner, there's limited interaction. There's very little eye contact going to be going on with the group because they're all facing the same direction, and really it's unlikely that they will swarm and mingle with other people in the room. So instead, I did adopt and started using the cafe style layout, so having spacing tables out in the room, even though this was hard in some of the production rooms, spacing them out and having groups of 4 or 3 around the table. But it was just so interesting to me to see the shift in how people were relaxed, how people were opening up more, and also just the chat that was happening in the moments in between the activities. So definitely rearrange the layout. The second one is I started doing, it was offering to make them a drink as soon as they walked in the room. So I had the benefit of having a coffee machine in a little kitchen next door. So they'd come in and I'd ask, can I make you a coffee? And I would go and make that for them. And often they'd come with me. We'd have a little chat in the kitchen, and even as other people were arriving. But it was just, I think, this act of service that actually helped them relax, but also positioned me alongside, if not beneath them. So I debunked that kind of, if they felt there was a hierarchy coming into the room, there wasn't. Another one, background music. I can completely get it why stores have background music on when we shop. So having that on as people enter the room. And the other one is completely skip the weather chat and that surface chat. And instead ask a beautiful question. So you'll see there, the bottom left picture, there is obviously a load of cards on the table. I love any kind of card-based tool. I think definitely ECD introduced me to that. But I would often use, so if you can see there's a box there with the 100 questions there. I would often encourage someone, they could pick a card at random, everyone in the room had to answer that question, and it would just warm the group up, probably mentally and emotionally, to start sharing things about themselves. So it was a great way to break the ice, and I would often do this whilst people were still coming into the room, so there was never this awkward silence as we're waiting to start. The workshop, in essence, had already started as you were walking in because people were talking and answering questions. So there are a few tips to be like Lumiere. Next lesson, lesson 4, is dickheads don't cause your emotions. So I did check with Kaylee. I said, how much swearing can I do in this presentation? Because, well, a lot of swearing happened in these workshops. I was very much mirroring a lot of the behaviour and language that was used in the environment. But casual language did also really help create the right environment for this group, this workforce. So I did adopt it. But it almost felt that inevitably there was a moment where someone was blamed for how someone else was feeling. So in 99% of these workshops, this person, dickhead, I never got to meet him, but he's really famous. But dickhead kind of showed up when people were sharing stories. And I found that having a model or a tool to almost help prove dickheads, innocence, led to actually really great insight and greater accountability over one's emotions. So I'll share with you the tool that I used in near enough every workshop to help people really understand where their emotions are coming from. So it was really beneficial to break down how emotions are created during these workshops. So really giving the example that we observe something, we have a thought about what we've observed, whether it's a positive thought, a neutral thought, or a negative thought, and then this positive, neutral, or negative thought create either a desired, a neutral emotion, or an undesired feeling. So it creates that emotion, and therefore following that we act out, we behave in a certain way. And I would even go into those things of, sometimes we might feel like we can mask it, but often we can't. People always know something's off with us if we try to mask how we actually feel. So we use this to really, if someone was bringing an example up around dickhead or he did this, I would go, well, what did you observe? And they would talk through what they observed. And then I would go, what did you think of that? And they would obviously pick a negative thought. And in that moment, I go, well, what if you're wrong? What could be an alternative thought? What could be a positive thought? What if you're actually wrong? What would be the other side of the coin? And I got them to travel along this continuum, with this experience with dickhead, but in a very different way. And it just got them to become a lot more self-aware over their own thoughts, but also take accountability over their feeling and their actions as well. So this was a very helpful tool to kind of walk through any situation and get people really to understand their thoughts and feelings. And my last lesson for my time at Ingham's was get good at coaching. So with every ECD workshop, I didn't just focus on getting better at using the ECD. I also focused on actually how can I get better at being a coach. And I was supplementing this, so I was doing a formal certification in the background, but I found that by focusing on becoming a better coach, I was much more equipped to unpack those difficult moments in the room or in a one-on-one. I was more equipped to deal with them. So I felt like that was a real takeaway, that as much as I was focusing, and initially I was just on being really great at ECD, it was the moment I went, actually, if I focus on getting really good at this, what's going to happen? And it did kind of put the accelerator on the ECD. So that would be my other tip. But that is me in a nutshell, my time at Ingham's. I am willing to answer absolutely anything and everything, but yeah, I'll throw it back to you, Kaylee. If you're feeling nervous, you know, because you're thinking, oh, this is going to be difficult, you know, it's men, and you know, you have these kind of beliefs. It's check in with your own thinking first. I walked in with so many held beliefs of, you know, oh, they're not going to like this. This is too fluffy for them. I walked in with so many held beliefs, and I was wrong on all of them. And I really think, I don't think there has ever been a difficult session that I've delivered, like a difficult ECD workshop, or had a difficult individual in my workshop, because I think if I really focus on those moments which I thought were difficult, it was what was going through my head at the time. And so I think if you're walking in to deliver any ECD workshop and you've got any trepidation or nervousness or anxiety because of who it's with, it's all in your own head. That's you and your thinking. Because in reality, I've come out the other end and I've never had a bad experience. You know, I think this is important for people, and they're willing to talk about it when they're given the right space to talk about it. So yeah, I would say, yeah, just check in with your own thinking and your own head, because that's what's making you nervous, or you're thinking it's going to be bad. Yeah, because I did it to myself.
Yeah.